Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Ask the Experts. My name is Sastani,
And I'm Jeff Witt.
and we're here every single evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to be able to answer your questions. So, what you want to do is throw it in the post, throw it in the chat right now. Let us know who you are, what your question is, and we will dive in deep. Just a few quick announcements. February the 11th through the 13th is the last chance weekend, as many of you are aware of. People are registering. If you are really considering it, we say this all the time: jump in, jump in, jump in, because we do fill up. And so we're going to be doing some unique things on this Valentine's weekend. This is the first time we did it during this weekend, so we're going to put some extra spice on it to really enhance the experience. Also, tonight is the night where we launched the Foundry program. Likewise, Daniel launched Unearthed. We just got finished with it. What an amazing first session. 11 more weeks to go. And listen, if you haven't gotten in, you can reserve your space for the next one. We will be introducing a next class coming up not too far from now. So we'll be talking about some of the things that we're sharing with them, and hopefully, if it whets your appetite, you will find a desire to jump in there and to begin to work on yourself. We say this all the time, that you are the lowest common denominator in every relationship that you enter into. And so if your relationship isn't where you want it to be, take a look at yourself. What am I doing wrong? How can I get better? How can I become the best version of myself? And that's what it's designed to do. Jeff, anything you want to share before we jump into these questions that we're still waiting for?
I was just gonna say that was a really great session, first great session with the guys. It was really awesome. I know that every slot filled up this time, but anybody that's waiting and knocking on the door to get in, we are going to start another one very soon. We just have to get those details for you. But welcome everybody, and let's get into it. Let's get these questions rolling.
All right, we got a question. Thank you for that. Like, share, and subscribe. We have a question from Ayana. How to tell my husband his joking is more like subtle jabs, always ends, it was joke, I can't see something joke. Okay. So basically, he's joking with you. It's not funny. It feels like you're the butt of his jokes, whether he's doing it privately or publicly. It can be humiliating. It could be degrading and demoralizing. And how do you tell him? What you do is you don't tell him in your frustration. You don't pop off. You don't talk to him and share your feelings while you're in your feelings, because he may not be receptive to it. This is what I would suggest you do. You preface the conversation by saying, "Hey, babe, there's something really serious, that's been weighing on my heart that I really want to talk to you about. When would be a good time for us to have a conversation?" Right? So you're inviting him into the conversation. If he's watching the baseball game, football game, whatever, not a good time. If he's distracted, multitasking, not a good time. If he's at work, not a good time. So you're giving him the opportunity to tell you when the most ideal time is. When you have that conversation, there should be no distractions, there should be no technology, and you want to speak from your heart. What you want to do is you want to have I language, not you language. When you say stuff like, when you do this and when you do that, and you always, and defenses go up. When you take ownership of how you feel, I've been feeling some type of way. When there are certain comments made, it makes me feel like such and thus and so. When you present it like that, he may be more open. And you may want to give examples, because a lot of times people will say, "Well, that's what I do. I don't do that. Give me an example." I would be prepared to give him a few different scenarios so there can be no denying, no refuting, no disputing what you're saying. He would have to acknowledge that's what he's doing. Now, if he says, "Well, that's not my intention, that's not what I'm trying to do," you're not here to question his motive, because he may not be trying to be maliciously attacking you, though it may feel that way. So you're not here to judge his heart. You're here to evaluate his behaviors, and regardless of his motive, let him know, listen, whatever you mean by that, whatever your motive and intent, this is how it makes me feel. I don't want to feel this way. Can we change this? Can we work on this? Because it always keeps me in a dark space, or it causes me to feel negative. When you position it like that, it should help. Also, I would say, do I have permission the next time you do it, that I can call you out on it in the moment. So now you're consciously aware of what you just did rather than me waiting a few days, a few hours, a few weeks to address it. If he says yes, now you can go forward and quickly address it when it occurs. Because when a person makes a decision to stop doing something, sometimes they're unconscious of what they're doing and they have to become consciously aware, and your reminders will help him to do so. So that's how I would handle that situation. Jeff, what say you?
I agree wholeheartedly. I just want you to also consider your tone when you talk about this, because if you're up here like this in a hiding voice, you're going to raise tension. The calmer your tone and demeanor is when you have this conversation, the more receptive it is. The more receptive people will be to it, because you're now in the tone that you want him to be when he talks back to you. Now, the other thing that I would also simply say is that you need to make sure that you keep that conversation focused on solutions and not the problem. Like Asani said, you can't point. You have to make everything like a me conversation. I don't feel this way, just like Asani said. It's so important. I can't even stress how important psychologically that is, because you can trigger somebody to have a reaction that you don't want, that'll get you going back in the same patterns that you were going before. To change the behavior, you have to change your behavior.
There it is. Perfect answer. Let's go to the next question from JG. After multiple infidelities, we've moved out of the state for a new start. My husband's family doesn't support this. It's like we're dead and gone. Now I feel bad. The lack of love from them hurts. How can I help? Yeah. So let me just say this is not uncommon for people to pack their bags and relocate based upon the type of affair that took place. Sometimes the affair was with someone in your community, in your neighborhood, in the same school, in the same church, and being around that environment can be triggering because I have to pass by this person's home or this person's job, or they always congregate here. So I'm constantly triggered. So moving away allows us to have a fresh start, a new environment. Okay. And so that's one of a number of things you can do to start. But family's not supporting it. And now I feel like they're not expressing the type of love and connection they had before. It's interesting. I remember when we moved to Costa Rica and we left the country, it was like literally people did not understand it. They didn't get it. It was like, it was just an hour time difference. It was just a few hours away. I said, listen, we left from New Jersey to go to Costa Rica. Don't you know that that trip is shorter than us flying to California? It's a shorter trip. You're on a 3 hour time zone difference from New Jersey to Costa Rica to California. We're on a 1 hour time difference from New Jersey to Costa Rica. I couldn't understand it, but some people were impacted by that. And so this is the adjustment period that you're going through. I would say encourage your husband to connect with them, to have a relationship with them. Listen, there's nothing wrong with vacations. There's nothing wrong with holidays. There's nothing wrong with trips back just because. I don't think that his entire relationship should be lost because he moved to a different state. And so, whatever you can do to support him and encourage him and to reinforce why you moved in the first place, I think that would be helpful. Jeff?
I would just 100% just agree with what you just said. There's not really much more to say than that.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next one. Kayla says, what do you do if you get threatened with, I'm assuming, divorce
Divorce.
daily? But it's not just infidelity in the equation. He relapsed on alcohol at our wedding 4 months ago, and his mom recently passed. And
It only, it only.
Oh, okay. It only increased the chaos in the home. This usually happens when he is sober, the next day feeling like crap from detox. So I'm trying to connect your points here. He's threatening divorce every day, and you're saying it's influenced not only by infidelity, his affair or your affair. It's influenced by his alcohol, and when he has alcohol in him, it causes him to react in such and such a way. So what do you do when you're threatened by this? Well, you need to get counseling, okay? Because it seems like his behavior can be influenced by alcohol. So, in addition to couples counseling, obviously he struggles with alcohol, and maybe he needs to go to a recovery group, a group that can support him in his addiction, in his struggle, in his vice, so that he's working on becoming a better him while simultaneously you're working on restoring your relationship.
Uh, and the truth of the matter is, when people get into alcoholism, I had an alcohol problem for a while. It's usually due to some sense of self that is not being fulfilled, and that's not necessarily, that's definitely probably not even coming from the marriage situation. It's probably coming from something he desires in life that is haunting him, that he can't figure it out, because it usually comes from a state of conscious incompetence. When we land in a place where we feel incompetent, we know we have a problem and we're incompetent to fix it, we use sedation tactics. Those sedations on the benign side could be video games and sports and gossip and a bunch of other things. But then the increased level becomes drugs and alcoholism, and it can lead to depression and even things much worse than that, violence, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some issue in that level of conscious incompetence in his world that needs to be discussed, handled, because men and women alike, they tend to, when they're in that state of conscious incompetence, they may have some progress and they build something up, and then they'll just go and burn it all down. We call that the build and burn phase in growth. And that build and burn, they just go through a cycle of coming out of it and burning everything down, and coming out of it and burning everything down. And then it eventually turns into a depression where they stay stuck. So they absolutely need help. They need to talk to someone. My dad worked in the field of alcoholism for over 40 years and wrote some extreme papers on this. And this is did some studies that went before Congress. And so alcoholism, I got to see a lot of the recovery process my entire life. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing that you have to have someone help you through that. It's not something you can do on your own. Very few people can quit cold turkey. It's one of the two main drugs that actually have a true physical withdrawal. So if he's gotten to the point where he's got any kind of shakes or any kind of things like that, and if he hasn't, that's good, but you can actually become physically addicted to alcohol to a point where you actually need it in your body to stay alive. And you definitely need to get help before it gets to that point.
Jeff, all that sounds good, but you just said I used to struggle with alcohol. So what did you do to overcome it?
I had help. I had help all around me. I had people who were like, my wife was constantly like, man, you need to slow down drinking. You need to stop doing that. And it was, I hit a point that I got scared. When I hit that point that I got scared, I made a very serious turn. If you want me to tell them what happened, I literally woke up with my hands covered in blood and my shirt covered in blood because I had beat somebody and I had no idea what happened, where it happened, who it happened to. And that scared the living daylights out of me and made me realize that if I can black out like that, and luckily, fortunately, it wasn't anyone in my family, but if I could black out like that, that it was too much. And so I sought help and I got help. I didn't actually use a counselor. I used a friend who had been through it, and we talked our way through it. And I just literally poured out all the alcohol and didn't buy any for a while. That was what it took for me. But other people need a lot more help than that.
So, if your vice, if your affliction, if your addiction, if your sin is impacting you and you think it's just affecting you, that's not the case. There are other people who are affected by what you're internally struggling with. So please get the help that you need to turn your life around. We got another question from Ralph Welch. What is the best way to help find others that has been through what you have and get to know them when you and your spouse are introverts? To me, the solution is work inwardly on your introvertness, if you will. There are levels to it. There's some people who they're introverts, but they know how to at least engage. They can't be around people for too long because it sucks their energy, and they have to get back, into their own private quarters where they feel more comfortable. And then there are others who never leave the door because they think they're going to be attacked by a lion or a monster or a dog or something like that. I don't know what level you're on, but I would say you have to stretch. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's less about how do we connect with other people if we're introverts. It's more about overcoming whatever those internal resistors are within you that keep you from wanting to connect. So it's an inward work that manifests into your ability to build relationships and get what you need from other people.
Yeah, that's it. I want to add a caveat. I did find out what happened. I got into a street fight. Everyone told me about it, but waking up and not knowing, that fear that you could have ended his life, or you know what I mean. I'm glad it was just that, but I didn't want to leave that question hanging like I got a body or something.
Yeah, that's a pretty serious situation, and I'm glad you got the help you need, Elena. I appreciate and admire you and your wife and all you guys put out there. I've been listening and hoping I could reconcile with my husband, but the dynamics of the situation are too much. But thank you all guys for what you try to do. I think if he and I embarked together down your program, there may have been a chance. So now my question is, why are you telling me this? Why are you putting that in a public forum? Are you crying for help because you want something to change? Do you believe that there's a possibility that things can turn around, but nothing has happened yet? That would be my question. And let me just tell you something. Overwhelmingly, most people who call for a discovery call, most people who come to intensives and start weekly sessions, much like you, they feel like, you know what? Our situation is just beyond repair. There's too many dynamics of the situation that make it hard. Do you know how many people, call in for a last chance weekend and say, you know what? I just feel like nobody's been through what we've been through, and our situation is so uniquely different. And I don't know if other people would be able to hear our story and be able to relate. And we all think that. But the fact of the matter is, we're all going through similar things. And that's why the power of group and community is so important, because you realize, man, I'm not alone. Other people can relate. Other people have gone through what I've gone through. At least gives me hope that there's another side to this that we can get to.
Elena, I'll tell you right now, if Hassani, what is the name of the video where Todd's giving their testimonial? If you can find it.
Yeah, it's a testimonial. It's on forgiveness. Forgiveness. I did a video. It was like a TED Talk type presentation, and I talk about their entire story. And they, at the end of the message, they stand up and they identify themselves. And you're right, but get to your point, because they may not know who Todd is.
No, I was just saying they need to. If she thinks her situation is too much, go listen to that. Just look up Hassani TED Talk on YouTube and you'll find it. He's wearing a plaid jacket. If you watch that, I think you might reconsider that your situation and the dynamics may not be too much.
Yeah. Here's another question. Have you ever dealt with a marriage with someone who has narcissistic tendencies, like lying, cheating, manipulating, making you question yourself, making you feel bad about yourself? The answer is absolutely yes. I was on a phone call yesterday with a woman who said, I think my husband's a narcissist. And I said, well, when I hear that word narcissist, I just think it's a overly used word, like the word friend, or any other word that you constantly hear. And I said, the fact of the matter is, all of us, including me on the phone, all of us have narcissistic tendencies and characteristics. Like, literally, if you read what is a narcissist, it would have an incalculable number of characteristics, behaviors, and attributes that I'm sure you could identify with. And so my question is, has there actually been a professional evaluation to determine if he or she has narcissistic personality disorder? Because now we're dealing with a mental disorder, not characteristics that are self-centered, selfish, and they just, they're just stuck in their ways. We're dealing with a mental thing here. And so, yeah, I would say 80-90% of the people we work with have narcissistic tendencies. So if the question is there any hope for a person in that situation? Absolutely yes, there is hope. And yes, there are levels of narcissism, and we've dealt with them, from individuals who exhibit light levels, and then those who are deep in the depths of their narcissistic tendencies. Right, Jeff?
Absolutely. It's one of those things. It is a true psychological diagnosis, and most of us are not qualified. None of us have read Jung. None of us have read Freud. None of us have read the actual works in psychotherapy. You can't really make that diagnosis on a person. What you can really say is you don't like how you feel when they behave a certain way. And at the end of the day, you just need help. And we've seen it all, literally. I know Hassani has definitely seen it all
Mhm.
over the last 10 years. Once in a while, I think he still gets surprised, but
Every now and then, yeah. And so the question she followed up with is, does it ever work? And in many cases, they do, because not only are we focused on your marital restoration, but your individual transformation. And that's the key. Like, we could focus on the relationship all we want. If we don't focus on us, then we're not really dealing with the true source of the problem here. We say this all the time. Your marriage doesn't own the issue. Your marriage owns the conflict. The conflict is created by the individual issues that we bring into the relationship. Once the issues go away, the conflict goes away. So that's why we have to focus on your individual healing process to help you overcome your own stuff, so it has a tremendous positive impact on the marriage. Okay, we have
I
another
think that
question.
is the biggest overlooked thing that keeps coming up over and over and over again that you keep having to re-explain over and over and over again. The personal transformation journey is the key to fixing the marriage. It absolutely
Without a
is.
shadow of a doubt. Absolutely. That's what it all comes down to. This leads to our next question. I tell my husband that I listen to you to find 4 ways that I can improve myself for our marriage. He says that I'm doing fine. And I think this is because he was the betrayer and doesn't want to. It's interesting because I was in a long session today, and we were talking about the difference between the betrayed and the unfaithful. And typically, the betrayed has all of the visual signs that they're hurting, their heart is bleeding, they're wrecked, their emotions have been shattered, their self esteem, their self worth, uh, the flooding emotions, the triggered thoughts. In comparison to, they are a wreck and trying to get healed and restored and set free. Meanwhile, the unfaithful is on the other side of the offense. It wasn't done to them. So it's easier for the unfaithful to say, I'm good. I've gotten past this. I'm waiting on you to get over it. Well, you weren't the one who was impacted in that way. But I don't want you to minimize your own brokenness. We say this all the time. What you did caused pain, hurt, and brokenness in your spouse. But your decision to do it and to go through with it is proof that there was pain, hurt, and brokenness within you in the first place. And that needs to be addressed. That's why we say that your individual recovery process is different. What you need is not what your spouse needs, because you're on the opposite side of the offense. And so while the betrayed spouse is dealing with, how do I forgive, and how do I trust, and how do I overcome these triggers, and how do I manage these flooding thoughts, and how do I deal with the rage and the anger and the pain and this, that, and the other, the betrayed spouse, the unfaithful spouse, should be dealing with, how do I trust? How do I build character? How do I build a wall of protection around myself so I'm not tempted to do it again? How do I have a new insight for, what a marriage is? How do I develop a code of conduct that will help go? So there's different things. And we both have to recognize that. So no, he's not good, because if he wasn't good, he wouldn't have done bad. Period. All right. The continuation, point out my flaws. Okay, how can I help him to be comfortable letting me know what he needs from me? I would say we say this all the time, creating a safe environment. And that is all about how you emotionally and verbally show up. If you want him to share, if you want him to pour out, if you want him to be open to communicate. When he shares a truth or a perspective, you can't beat him up. You can't tell him how he's wrong. That's stupid. That doesn't make sense. You can't allow your flooding emotions to get in the way, because he had apprehension talking to you in the first place. And now that he has, he looks at your reaction and response, and it will convince him why he shouldn't have been from the beginning. Or it will give him an indication that he can now, because it's safe. Is that right, Jeff?
Absolutely. Amen.
All right, let's go to the next one. Danielle says, I'm the unfaithful partner. I had an affair last year. And how do I help my partner trust me more? We have been going to counseling for a year, but he still doubts me, even though I'm trying to show up. Well, I think it was one of our practitioners came on, and she basically said, trust is lost in buckets and gained in drops. So it's one of the longest portions of the recovery process to build trust over time. Now, if you're showing up consistent, doing the right thing, being transparent, right? Not omitting information, you're doing all the right things, and there's still a struggle. Maybe on his part, he is not open to receive. He still looks through a lens of the past, and it reminds him of the hurt and pain, and he sees you through a lens of who you used to be rather than who you are. And this is why we say trust is a two-way street. So, for me, if I was working with you, I would find out, okay, where's the bottleneck here? Is it something you're doing, something he's doing? And how can we begin to coach you both through a process where you begin to open up in such a way where trust slowly but surely can be restored? And it should be restored slowly but surely. It should be, because I've got to be able to believe it. And there's got to be a pattern of consistency that I can look at that justifies my willingness to be able to trust. But sometimes we can delay the process and make it way too long. So, hopefully that kind of answer makes sense. What were you thinking, Jeff?
I think transparency is the biggest thing you can contribute. I mean, and there's all kinds of ways that you can do that. I would, in a good space, once again, not when he's emotional or when you're emotional, you should have a conversation about what transparency looks like for you and what he is expecting transparency wise, so that he can feel and build that trust. Like if you're out, like Sonny, you always talk about it. You'll Marco Polo your wife. You don't need to do that. She's not looking. But the fact that you're always on Marco Polo, which is an app that allows you to see, it's like a video chat where you are. Hey, honey, I'm in aisle 3 and I'm picking out this. Those kinds of things help to build the confidence back. So, FaceTime them or whatever you need to do to just, when you're out and about, just to build that trust. Never be too long without communication. And make that communication as visual as you possibly can without making it overwhelming. And that will help to contribute. Just the confidence of knowing where you are, what you're doing, and what you're about gives people a sense of security. So that's the biggest contribution I can give to you beyond actually working, coming to like the Last Chance Weekend or doing something like that with us.
Thank you, sir. Shanae, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. My husband cheated on me with my stepsister and 2 of her friends, all under the influence of drugs. He is in recovery today, and we had an argument, and I think I pushed him off the edge. And that's all you said. All I could say to you is give us a call, reach out to us. Go to the website, couplesacademy.org. Let's get on a discovery call and kind of talk through so that I can give you more of a response and maybe some guidance on what you can do. Legendary lady, I believe if he loved me, he wouldn't have done it. He definitely wouldn't have repeated it. And he would do the real work to fix it, and not only what is comfortable. I'm working on me. How do I move on? So my question is, when you say move on, I kind of how do I move forward, or how do I move on? Like I'm out. I don't know what you mean by that. Are you trying to get away from? Are you trying to work to restore and move further in terms of your commitment? That's my question.
And the tone there. So first of all, if he loved me, he wouldn't have done it. That's not true. Hassani, you talk about it all the time. It's not always love that is the motivator. Like I said, if someone is in that stage of conscious incompetence, they could be like one of the other people using drugs. They could be like one of the other people using alcohol. They could use many forms of sedation. Anything that drives pleasure response is a form of sedation. So if I'm arguing at home and I sedate, if I look to sedation, the toxic side of that is alcohol, drugs, and sex is one of those things that can be used as a form of sedation. It may not have to do with the love equation. It may have to do with something internal that they have not fixed, answered, and may have felt like they couldn't turn to someone else because there may be arguments or fights or lack of communication in the home. So it's not just he doesn't love you. We don't know that to be true, but it's a possibility. But to say that for certain kind of cuts off the ability to move forward and try to recover. Would you agree, Hassan?
Yeah, I think to your point, as it relates to love, people We talk about we did a 16-part series on love and talked about the difference between like phileo, eros, and agape love and what that looks like and how that shows up. And a lot of times people do bad things all the time that are compromising to their situation. But it's not necessarily a matter of them not loving you. To your point, there could have been an incalculable number of things that drove them to that point, into that place, though they do have a love for you. Now, of course, scripture says love doesn't seek to do evil. And we could look at an affair as an act of evil. But I think that, if we truly unpack it, and not look through things through a simple black, white, right, wrong type of lens, there's a whole lot of gray area in there. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens in people's lives where they fall subject to pressures and make bad decisions and live in regret. There's all types of things. And so my question would be, have you kind of talked with someone or worked with someone along with your husband to kind of pack what the reason was? What was the why for the affair in the first place? Because understanding that may change your perspective on whether he ever loved you or not. Kind of hope that helps. We have a couple more questions. I recently found out that my husband was having an affair. We've been watching your YouTube videos and the lives together until we started counseling, which is Friday. They have been very helpful. Lately, I have been having a lot of sexual dreams about my husband. Is this normal? Not sure what the dreams were. Are you having dreams that he's cheating on you? Are you having dreams that you two are having sex in the dream? I will say, dreams in general is something that the betrayed spouse does deal with, does struggle with, whether they're nightmares. Yes, all the time. And what I will say is that when it comes to dream states, they're not. I don't want you to have a literal interpretation of the dream. There are all types of dreams where things happen that are very abstract, and it requires you getting either an interpretation of that dream from God or doing some research. Because interestingly, when you type your dream in Google, there are all types of websites that will show up like forums where other people had similar dreams, and then they will break down what potentially the dream could have meant, and it gives you more insight to say, oh, that kind of makes sense. So yes, but dreams are very, very common after an affair.
Any
Anyone want to weigh
trauma,
in?
any trauma will create dreams. So dreams, so we learn through two types of modes, and the brain looks at it in two modes. The first one is called the focus mode. This is when we're awake trying to figure out the problems that are going on in our lives. It's like imagine yourself going through a maze, like a garden maze with all the different plants and shrubs, and you got to figure your way how to get through it. And you run into jams. And then we have the diffuse mode, which is the subconscious mind kind of working kind of similar to a drone, slowly putting all the pieces together. Well, in our subconscious state of sleep, especially when we reach REM sleep, the mind is working overtime trying to figure these out. And the way that migrates in our memory looks very, very strange when we wake up and actually have a remembrance of the dream. But have you ever gone to bed with a problem and woken up with a solution? This is what happens in that diffuse state of the mind. So you can look these things up. They do exist. So it's the diffuse mode, and the dreams are just one manifestation of that diffuse mode.
That was deep. I gotta meditate on. I gotta chew on that for a minute. But there's truth to what he's saying, guys. Listen, I hope this has been helpful tonight. That is our time. We're a little bit over. Thank you for your patience. Tune in. Is today Wednesday? Today's Wednesday. So we have another night. Tune in tomorrow night for Ask the Experts. But in the meantime, take a look at this for our next Last Chance weekend, and we will see you on tomorrow.